It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Well, today we have a special co-host. One of our very first patrons to come on board and support our show is Steph's big brother, Clay Janson. Welcome to the show, Clay.
What's up, ladies? Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a little while. We've been planning this.
Yeah, that's right. And now it's Wine Wednesday.
Perfect.
And Clay and I are actually in Phoenix together, side by side, and Val is in Skype land. She's in Colorado Springs, really kind of sitting across from us. But we were wishing we were in Colorado Springs right now because it's like 100 and something here.
Eek.
Today.
Ouch.
Oh my gosh, Val, you have it made.
Ouch. You know what? First of all, I wish we were together in the same room because that would be ep to the IC. Did they say that? It would be epic. It would be epic. I don't know.
I
don't
think her microphone's working.
Ep to the IC. Did the kids say that? I don't know. It would be on fleek. Is that what they say? And then we could be out on the back deck because it is a beautiful 76-degree, perfect day.
Okay.
And
all right, now she's living it.
Yeah.
It's like salt in the woo.
But in this episode, we have to tell you, listeners, we are going to be having Clay ask us some questions. So we're kind of going to flip-flop what we normally do. So he's got some burning wine questions, and we may or may not know the answers, but we'll see how that goes.
Right, and it's good for us every once in a while to be in the hot seat, don't you think?
Pun alert, everybody.
Hot as 105.
Oh, hotter for you guys. It's kind of lukewarm over here, but it might heat things up. And speaking of, let's give your bro a proper introduction, and then we're going to all share what we're drinking. So let's learn a little bit more about Clay, because he's actually been in It's Not 5 O'Clock, and We Don't Care listener supporter for 23 months, almost 2 years. Thank you so much, Clay. Wow.
Thanks, bro.
But who's counting?
Who's counting? We have a spreadsheet that does that for us.
Great.
But I don't know, when was it? October, I guess it was. So almost a year ago, Clay won the monthly Patreon drawing, which was the opportunity to co-host his own episode. And it has actually taken us 10 months of persistence and hardcore, dogged research to finally scrape together a recording date that works out for all three of our schedules, because we are busy, busy people. So the planets hooked us up today, and today is the day that Clay gets to host his own show. So who is he? He is the owner and engine behind Focus Financial Strategies. Actually, it's Focus, Phocus Financial Strategies Group. When he's not wearing his hat as a financial advisor and business owner, he dedicates his time to his family and local charities. Clay is a native to Phoenix, and his alma mater is Northern Arizona University. He loves trying new whiskeys and craft brews as much as he loves supporting his little sister, Steph, and the Wine to 5 podcast. And I got to say, we've got some pictures that are going to show up in the blog that show some other hats that he wears as well. So that should be fun. But thank you for being here, Clay. But let's talk about, first of all, what you're drinking.
Oh, yes. So
right.
This is kind of a cool thing that neither Clay or I have ever had. And this is called Barbancourt 3-star 4-year-old agricole rum from Haiti. This hadn't been opened yet, so we just got cracked this open, and come to find out, this distillery was founded in 1862 and is one of the oldest and most famous rums from Haiti. Apparently, a Frenchman from the region of Cognac founded the company after he moved to Haiti, and the rum is made from sugarcane juice, not molasses, and the sugarcane juice is what implies this rum agricole. It's double distilled, similar to cognac. Imagine that, the Frenchman from Cognac making a rum similar to cognac, and then aged in French oak barrels. This is really kind of cool, and Clay and I are drinking it more like a
Like a whiskey.
like a whiskey or a brandy, you know, and it's delicious. I mean, it only makes you want to have the 4-star 8-year and the 5-star 15-year to really compare all the Barbancourt rums.
And it's not like the regular rum that you're thinking. It's not like the spicy, sweet Captain style with a Coke. This is definitely more like a brandy or a whiskey where you maybe put 1 ice cube. We've got 1 ice cube in there right now.
Yeah, and it's light in color.
Yep, super light.
So yeah, check this out. It really does look like you're drinking
It looks like a whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like those sipping rums. We have some of those here too from Guatemala that we really like, and we wouldn't dare mix them with Coke or something like that. No. They are
Nowhere
sipping
near.
rums, and they are wonderful.
Justice. Yeah.
So let me tell you the story. I was going to tell you the story on how I got this bottle. So the story starts with an inheritance. Okay, because I'm in the business of managing assets, but a new client inherited some money, and pretty classically, we see this every once in a while. You know, it's people, we get the funds in their hands, and I saw this client start doing some pretty significant withdrawals. Long story short, I ended up just kind of getting nosy a little bit one time, and I said, JP, what are you doing with some of these funds? It seems like you're withdrawing pretty quick. And he ended up telling me this great story about he lives part of the time in Haiti. So he comes back and forth to the country, to the U.S., and he started building a all kids education school with dorms as a nonprofit organization. So he was using some of the funds he inherited from his mom, and it almost brought a tear to my eye, but the guy was building this school down there. He starts sending me pictures and all the blueprints of what the school is going to look like. And I asked him one day, I said, hey, is there anything I can do from here, from the United States? And he said, you know what? We really need books for the school. And I happened to be at the time on the board for the Friends of the Phoenix Public Library here in Phoenix. And we gathered all of our resources up because we do that. We find books for schools or kids that need them. So this was right up our alley. We got a bunch of books, sent them down there, filled the shelves of the school. He sent pictures back. And when he came back the next time, he brought this bottle of rum. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, it was so amazing just to be able to be a part of that whole experience with him and the school down there. And we still stay connected. And he sends me pictures of what's going on down there every once in a while. But I'm thrilled. This was the right time to open this up and share it with you, sis.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wow, we definitely have to open this bottle because there's just a beautiful story that's attached to it. Kind of like these great wine stories, but this time it's a rum story.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that when we say every bottle has a story, that doesn't just apply to wine. So obviously it applies to a great bottle of rum, a great cause, and a great story behind it.
What are you drinking, Val?
I think she's had a few of them already.
No. Val's got a bit of an ambient hangover, so there's that. Yay, extended release. This is the Angry Orchard Rosé Cider in my glass. So it's actually very low alcohol. It's only like 5.5%, something like that. We've talked about cider before on the show. Angry Orchard, which we believe has about 40% of the U.S. cider market already, is out of Walden, New York, although they do produce cider in 2 other states. But what's cool about this is they kind of got on the rosé bandwagon, which, not just the wine industry did, but we've seen pink gins out there. We've seen all kinds of other pink drinks. Well, this is a pink cider. And what they do is they use these Amour Rouge red flesh apples that they get in France. I like to call them the Teinturier of apples. I don't think that's appropriate because Teinturier applies to grapes, but it is an actual, if you cut the apples open, the flesh is red. And they're really, really cool looking. And then they put some other, I call them eating apples, like Gala or Granny Smith or whatever. They call them culinary apples. And they put those in there, as well as sweet potato, a radish, and hibiscus, which I did not know.
Oh.
But this is one of the most refreshing, ridiculous, not sweet, drier summer beverages that John and I have really kind of gone through a lot this summer. So this is a nice end of summer beverage. Probably be really good down there where it's 100+ degrees too, because it's low alcohol.
Yeah, I bet Clay's wife Lindsay would really like that. That sounds pretty good.
I'm just going to hide that in the back refrigerator. Nobody can find it.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful pink color. Like I said, low alcohol. We had a few barbecues this summer, and this was actually one of the favorites because it's a real crowd pleaser.
Nice. Yeah, you mentioned that to me, I think a couple weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, that sounds really good. Something I would totally like. And I mean, you definitely in this kind of weather in Phoenix, you want to be sipping on a cold cider.
I was thinking I could just swim in all that.
Just
fill my pool up with the Angry Orchard Rosé.
Get your floaties on. just like
swim in
bob
that.
Up and down like an apple.
Oh, I got some in my mouth. Oh no, you guys shouldn't swallow that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, more so than this rum. This is a good stiff like winter drink.
And we're here in the summer.
I know.
That's why we put ice cube in it.
Hey, whatever. Pumpkin spice lattes came out yesterday, so...
Oh, my gosh. Don't tell my wife, please. Please.
I'm not a calendar person. I do what I want whatever time of year, but I'm still kind of like... It's not even... we're still a month away from fall, technically, and seasonal goes, but the pumpkin spice lattes were released yesterday.
We need to delay this podcast being released so Lindsay doesn't find that out. Let's just release this in December.
That's funny. Well, I think Clay's going to have to take it away from here now. This is our challenge.
The burning wine question.
The burning, because we're burning up over here in Phoenix.
I get to grill you guys. This is pretty fun.
I know. I'm kind of like, why did we do this?
Yes. I got to change the format.
I love it.
All right. You ladies ready for the burning wine questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So this is one that's been bugging me. And this is the tricky part, in less than 10 words, what the heck is terroir? Am I even pronouncing that right? I've heard that word a bunch of times. What is terroir?
Terroir.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
Some people say terroir, and I would believe the proper French approach, like noir, they say noir, terroir. We say terroir because we're Americans, but in 10 words or less, I like to say sense of place.
That was 3 words.
Sense of place.
That was 3 words. You did it.
No, sounds like that's the abbreviated version.
Okay, the abbreviated version.
Yeah, sense of place, climate, location, water, sun, soil, man, and winemaking. So there's your 10 words.
Nice.
Whoa, that was 10 words.
That was 10,
wow.
and I wouldn't change any one of those words.
Wow.
And you could switch out like environment with soil or exposure to sun, or aspect, all those things. Yeah. But we should note that even though it's the wines or the whatever we're talking about, apricots, we're talking about brandy, we're talking about that agricole rum you're drinking right now, there's a sense of place because it applies to anything that can be made with an agricultural product. So in Haiti, for example, you're drinking a rum that is made specifically with a type of plant, probably grown and broken down and distilled a specific way according to tradition. So man actually comes into play. So what we want to get across is that it's not just... Terroir doesn't just mean dirt. Oh, I can taste the terroir. It doesn't really work that way. It's not just like the dirt itself. It's all the things that go into making what that thing is in your glass so unique. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. No, totally. I agree with that. I mean, there is so much more that you could say to describe it, but then it goes back to being like, what? So when you do keep it condensed, which is, what Clay's trying to go, okay, if I were to explain it to somebody else, what would I say that isn't, 3 paragraphs long? Sense of place, climate, location, water, sun, soil, man, winemaking. I mean, that's exactly 10 words. Why don't they just put that on the bottle?
I
don't know. Why don't they put that on there? That is a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very good question. And I think it is important that we revisit those basic concepts that we talk about in the wine world so often. I keep spelling terroir wrong here. I don't know why.
That's right. I keep saying it wrong.
Did you do that? Okay. All right. Terroir. There we go.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Next question, Clay.
Right. On to question number 2. So I'm a bourbon kind of guy. So we do a lot of whiskeys and bourbons here at the Janson house. So I'm always thinking about how long the bourbons have been aged. So I wanted to know more about, in the wine world, how long is a wine aged? Is there some sort of guideline or some sort of pattern that they follow, or, how long does wine age in the barrel?
Right. Well, there really isn't a pattern. I mean, Val, it's just based on tradition or law, or the winemaker, decides. It really depends on what country you're talking about. Do they have to follow a certain requirement under regulation? So there isn't a good answer to that question, but I think it's a great question just so that you know that it's never the same per wine. I mean, there's obviously some really outstanding red wines even that never see
the inside of a barrel.
Inside a barrel at all.
Is there ever a wine that's like in a barrel more than 15 years? Do they put stuff away that long?
15 years. Well,
so
it can be, but it's not typical. Yeah. And it's not, I don't know. Val, is there any wine that is mandated to be in 15 years? That seems like that's not anything I've heard of.
Nothing I have heard of. I mean, there are some port wines that obviously stay in barrel for quite a while. There are some long-aged Riojas, Rioja being one of the longest-aged wines in the world, but typically you don't see them in barrel more than about 7-10 years or so, I would say. Right. I don't know, Steph. I personally have not seen it, but as we've seen recently, there are so many things in the alcohol world that we have yet to get our lips on. So it's
totally. And then sometimes things change too, right? The regulations change or new things develop as a new law, and we learn it at that point in time. But so there's not really any kind of defined, unless you're going specifically to Barolo or Brunello, where they'd say, in order to put this on the label, you have to have so many years. And, so it might be 2 years, it might be 4 years, sometimes it's dictated just how many months, 36 months or whatever, So that's kind of white wines obviously can be aged in barrel too, but a lot of it depends on just the winemaker, if there's a law or if it's the tradition of the family's brand.
Now, wasn't there a whiskey, I don't know, Clay, because you're a whiskey lover, I know you're more of a bourbon lover, but did you ever hear about the Hammerhead, a 1989 Czech whiskey?
No.
So apparently this whiskey was made before the Berlin Wall fell in Czechoslovakia, right? Yeah, in the former Czechoslovakia, I should say. And I heard about this because I'm a big fan of Whiskey Cast and of Mark Gillespie, and he tweeted something about how this 1989 Czech whiskey was getting really hard to get. So I started kind of calling around to my sources to see if I could get some, because apparently there was a barrel that was still hanging out. I want to say it was still in the barrel, and it was only and it was only recently rediscovered, and so a company started releasing it. But it was in the barrel for, I want to say, decades. I don't think it was bottled yet. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
Good luck getting your hands on it, because we've been trying to, and I'm like, oh no, you can still get. It's called Hammerhead. You can still, I think, get some Hammerhead, but you can't get that 1989 Czech whiskey. So that would be.
Now we know what to Val for Christmas.
That's right. Yeah. That's a stocking stuffer.
That's a stocking Val stocking stuffer right there.
Yeah, that's some good stuff there too. I think that was a good question. Yeah, some wine never aged in barrel, some aged in excess of 5 years if you're talking Grand Reserva Rioja, or even longer depending on Barolo Reserva, etc. But I don't know of any that have spent decades in wood on purpose.
Yeah, and what's also kind of interesting too, right, is if you're looking at a wine and you're like, oh, I think isn't the Barolo supposed to be aged this long? It has to be aged that long according to law, but it can be aged even longer if the winemaker wants it to.
Right. You see a lot of that in bourbon, where the minimum is usually 2 years, but anything less than 4, you typically have to put that on the label that it was less than 4, and you have to make that public. But most of them are 5s or longer. Yeah. Good ones are 12s and plus. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite bourbon, Clay, before we get to the next one? Just curious.
Oh, my favorite bourbon is Blanton's.
It is a Blanton's. Okay.
Blanton's, which is getting crazy hard to find, driving us crazy out here, because you go to the liquor stores and you don't even barely walk in the door. They're like, they already know what you're there for, and they're like, okay, you got to come back Thursday. And by the time you come back Thursday, it's already gone. It's not even on the shelf. So we're trying to figure out the mystery of why this is happening here. So if I find out, I'll let you guys know. But it's been getting scarcer and scarcer, kind of like Pappy Van Winkle. I'm sure you guys have heard of Pappy Van Winkle.
Yeah.
So it's kind of getting that sort of following. And there's a rumor out there that they're doing it on purpose to make it more like a Pappy. Scarcity factor.
There's all kinds of
trickery, marketing.
There's all kinds of that. I have a word that I won't use because we don't want to make it too explicit. But I have a whiskey guy here in Colorado Springs. A shout out to Justin over at Veterans Liquor, and he'll give me those little hints. I'm like, hey, they've cut off supplies to Colorado, so stock up on it. Or I had to buy 5 cases of that so you could have your Redbreast Irish whiskey, or whatever it is.
Yep.
And he'll give me that. He knows the inside of those things. He's really a good source for all the behind-the-scenes juju that goes on in the whiskey world, and has turned me on to some amazing bottles. But that's a whole other day for a whole other podcast. And yeah, shout out to Whiskey Cast if you are a whiskey lover and need a really good whiskey podcast. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, we ready for question number 3?
Let's do it. I think we're winning, Steph. I think we're winning.
I know,
I
right?
know.
It's like we just
There's
did
no
that
winners
game
and losers
show.
here.
This is a game show.
The game show. All right. All right, question number 3, ladies. Do all white wines come from white grapes? And, of course, vice versa, red wines, red grapes.
Val, you want to take the lead?
All right. I will start. And Steph, you can come in and clean up, I guess.
Okay.
But the simple answer to your question is no. White wines can be made with red grapes. And, of course, sparkling wine is the first thing we think of. Champagne, Pinot Noir, and Meunier are the key grapes in that appellation, along with Chardonnay. But you can have a Blanc de Noir, which is a white wine made with red grapes. And the same goes for still wines as well. That means basically all the color is in the skin, unlike those apples we talked about earlier, those red fleshed apples. All these grapes, most grapes, wine grapes, have clear juice. So it is totally possible to make white wine from red grapes.
Yeah, like even at the recent Society of Wine Educators Conference, I brought a bottle of a white Sangiovese.
Oh.
Yeah.
It just never hit the skin.
Right, it never touched the skin. So it's just clear juice that they make into a white wine. That's a great example. But yeah, so red wines in general, that you're getting the color from the skins. Mm-hmm. Unless it's a Tenturier grape, there can be color from the actual juice because the pulp of the grape is pink.
So does that make
white.
it less marketable or more marketable? Because I asked this question because I never really see that marketed when you go looking for wines. It's not like you see a Sangiovese it's like an albino Sangiovese. There should be a section that says
Sangiovese that's white.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think those things without having it's a hand sale because people won't understand it unless there's somebody who really talks them through it, because even if you just put something cool on the label or a shelf talker, it can't do it justice. I think it's just not mainstream. And even if you put something about Tenturier grapes, there's very few of them in the grand scheme of the wine grapes, but people will go, I don't get it, I don't know, so it doesn't make them want to buy it.
I would buy it if it was standing out on the shelf with a bunch of Sangiovese stuff, right? The one white bottle, like it would just seem like it would jump out at you.
That's true. That's true.
All right, I'm going to look.
I think also if we go back to, I remember the late 90s. So the American blush market came out also, remember the White Merlot?
Yes, right. White Merlot.
I remember I was discovering sushi about that time, and I found White Merlot to be a fun wine to have with sushi back in the day. So I think our blush market and the way it's characterized as sweet wines, we took red grapes and we left some of the, fermentable sugars in there, the residual sugars, and we got these sweet pink wines. So if you were to say white Sangiovese, I think people's minds would default to a blush style wine that's got a little more residual sugar. I don't think anybody would look for a clear, white, pale, golden Sangiovese just made with, no skin contact at all. So I think that is interesting. And like Steph said, I've rarely seen a Sangiovese that's made into a clear, pale wine.
Right. Well, which is why it was such an anomaly that I was like, I should bring this to the conference, and have it at our Wine to Five meet and greet. But that is, occasionally you do see things that are just wow, this is a typical red wine, and I'm having it, looking at it, seeing that it's a white wine, tasting it, it is dry. But it never really fully has an experience of a white wine. I mean, it has some similarities, but you can tell that it doesn't have necessarily the same aromatics, that you might get from traditional.
Did you serve it chilled like a regular wine?
Yeah, you still serve it chilled.
Yeah.
So
I think that answers your question.
It did.
Yay.
Yes.
All right, now we're going to have some fun here. We're moving on to the embarrassing wine stories. So I don't think you guys get put on the spot very often with this stuff. And you always ask your guests, hey, we got to have this embarrassing wine story. So I'm going to flip it over to Val first. So Val, Do you have any new embarrassing wine stories that you wanted to divulge to your podcast listeners?
My life is an embarrassing wine story, Clay.
Perfect. All right, moving on.
No. Have you not listened to this show?
There's going to be a video for everybody later on the blog. You're going to want to check that out on Val's embarrassing wine life.
Yeah, let me think. Okay, so I have a short one. And this was back when Steph and I were in the Society of Wine Educators long strange trip preparing for our CWE exam, our Certified Wine Educator exam. We were practicing for part of the exam that is testing the faults identification.
Yeah, faults.
And we had practiced a couple times with the fault kits, but Ms. Jane was giving us our strategy for how to narrow down the faults in the glass by looking at the wine, smelling at the wine, swirling the wine, tasting the wine. And just to give listeners an idea who've not taken this exam, you are given a base wine. So you're given like a Pinot Grigio or something like that. You're given a glass, and this glass has been unadulterated. And then you're given 8 more glasses that have
7 or 8.
Yeah, 7 or 8 more.
Yeah.
I can't remember now. 7 or 8 more glasses that have a fault, like too much sugar, too much tannin, accessants, too much alcohol. Yeah, so it's like an imbalance. It's an imbalance in the wine. And your job is using that base wine that you have, the what they call it, the control wine. Again, science background. You've got the control wine, and then you've got all these wines with a fault, and then, of course, you've got your spit glass and your water. And somewhere in the middle of this practice, I was kind of getting into it, and I totally lost track of the fact I had my control glass in one hand, my spit cup in the other, and then you're reaching back and forth between the glasses. And at one point, I took a sip of one of the faulted wines. I guess it was the sulfur or something, and I spit it right into my control glass.
No, I don't know this story.
Wasn't I sitting next to you?
I don't know this. I don't remember this.
I spit the faulty wine right into my control glass.
Oh, yay!
I was
That's
done.
a whole new
At
control
this point,
wine.
I had to remember what that control glass was, and I just had to push it aside and just kind of go from there. And I think I did okay, and I got enough of the practice down, but it happened on more than one occasion where I have actually spit into, let's just say, not my spit cup during a blind tasting because I totally lost track of which glass was in which hand, and I just start spitting into whatever's in my hand.
That is so funny.
That's a good one.
I have never heard you tell that story, and obviously I was too wrapped up in my own spit that I didn't see what you were doing.
Well, you had skin in the game, Steph. Remember, you were taking the whole thing the next day.
Yeah.
I was just like, just trying to get by, man.
Oh.
Yeah.
So if you have a spit cup around Val, you might want to just block your wine glass too.
It's conditioned response. Yeah, if you see a cup, I'm spitting in it. I'm a spit like a rabid llama.
She's like a fierce llama over there. That's funny. Oh my god.
That was a good one. All right. We're going to flip it over to my sister. You're up, sis. What's the new embarrassing wine story in your radar here?
This is a very new story as of just a month ago when I was in Menorca and we were at the grocery store and everybody speaks Spanish there. You're on the Spanish island of Menorca. I don't speak Spanish, even if I try. I mean, I'm like, hola.
Habla inglés.
I'm lucky if I can get that out. Well, anyway, I was assigned out of the 6 of us in our group. Some people are getting water and sunscreen and things like that, and I'm going to the wine section. Somebody else is getting beer. I'm in charge of getting some wine. And I go to the wine section, and I'm looking. I'm trying to get something reasonable, trying to get something that might suit everybody's preferences. And specifically, my friend Missy, she's very particular about what she likes. So I'm really concentrating, and I pick up this bottle of wine off the shelf, and I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, you know what, second thought, maybe not this one. And I go to put it back on the shelf, and it doesn't quite make it onto the shelf. And it crashes to the floor. And now we have this entire bottle of wine smashed on the hard floor of the grocery store where I can't really effectively communicate and apologize to anybody. So now I'm in a panic. nobody's around to help me. None of my friends are there to, like, you know, tell me it's going to be okay.
Ayúdame.
Yeah, there's no team effort. So I go to the front of the store, and I don't see any employee that it can help me. I only see the people who are in the checkout.
Oh, no.
The cashiers who have lines of people. And I have to explain that I have broken a bottle of wine in that aisle, you know. And they roll their eyes at me, you know, like, you silly American. And they send somebody to the aisle to clean it up. But I get back to the aisle myself, of course. And it's still there. The glass, the wine. It's so embarrassing.
It's like a walk of shame.
There's a walk of shame, and I am just mortified. And people are looking at me and, like, you know, glaring. And I've got this flaming red hair of mine, you know. It's just like, I just stand out like a sore thumb. And anyway, so I just grab another bottle of wine in a hurry. And then we have to go back to the checkout so I can embarrass my walk of shame again. And when we leave, and we finally later on that day, it was like 2 hours later, we bust out the wine out of the cooler. And my friend Missy's like, I don't like this wine. This is an awful. This is awful. And I was like, dude, you please understand that I was under a lot of stress after I broke that bottle of wine.
You're drinking this wine.
You are going to drink it. I don't care if you don't like it.
You go back next time.
That's right.
Send Missy back in there.
That's right. You go embarrass yourself.
That's funny.
Oh, well, there's always something I'm doing that's embarrassing.
Hence the podcast.
And surviving. Surviving it. But I think, Clay, it's going to be your turn here.
You guys are going to try to put the gun on me, huh?
Yeah.
I thought this was my show.
Yeah, Clay. We know you've got one. Dish it.
All right.
It's not called the Wine
3-5.
It's called Wine 2-5.
Wine 3-5. That I could trademark that. Wine 3-5. Okay, I don't have a lot of wine stories, but I do have wine story. And it's not as good as either one of yours, so I'm just going to say that right out.
Don't say that.
All right, so we do a wine charity event for our Rotary Club here in Phoenix, and this was a couple years ago. We have about 7 or 8 different wineries there, and Lindsay and I were like super excited about 2 of the wines at the same winery. So one was a blended red with some Malbec, and one was the rosé. And so we were, you know, we kind of stepped aside away from the winery booth, and Lindsay and I were talking about getting a couple bottles, and then next thing you know, we're talking about getting 2 bottles, and now it's 4 bottles, and we're up to 8 bottles, and I'm like going, well, why don't we just get a case? And we both look at each other like we were nervous, because neither one of us in our lives have ever bought a case of wine. We've just never bought that. So I'm looking at her like, I just feel weird. Is that too much? Is that saying something? So I don't know. We got all nervous, and I've never, 1 or 2 bottles we could have walked up and, been fine with that. And so we were kind of getting nervous. So we walked back up to the winemaker, right? Because it's two married couples that run this winery. It happens to be Chateau Tumbleweed. And so we walk up, and one of the owners is there. And so she asks us, how can she help after we've been tasting the wine at this charity event? And she knows that we like the rosé and we like this Malbec blend. And so I looked to her and I said, hey, we're really nervous about this, but we think we'd like to buy a case from you, and we've never, ever bought a case of wine before. And she stops me like dead in my tracks of speaking, and she has this flustered look on her face, and she's like, oh my gosh, I've never sold a case of wine to anybody, because they were like a brand new winery. She's like, they're brand new. She's like, oh my God, you guys are going to be my first case of wine that I'm ever going to sell. I'm like, oh my God, you're our first. And we had this like moment. We like had this embarrassing moment right there in front of everybody. Like we're all just giddy, and we're like buying a case of wine, and she's getting her husband over there. Oh my God, honey, they're buying a whole case, at this brand new winery. So that was pretty embarrassing for us for a few minutes, but it was also warm and fuzzy. So it was kind of a little bit of both. But then we went back last year, and we had this instant connection. So when she saw, she's like, oh my God, you guys were my first ever last year. And of course, since then they've sold, hundreds or whatever, thousands probably of cases. But she was very excied, and we were too. So it was pretty fun.
That is so cute.
Pretty fun stuff.
Wine case virgins.
Yeah.
Wine case virgins.
That's what it felt like.
That is a hashtag for this episode.
You never forget your first. You never
forget your first case.
It's never as good as the first time.
It didn't last very long either. Anyway.
And that, my friends, is the title of this episode.
It didn't last that long. I meant the case of wine, everybody. Okay, that's what I meant. Yeah.
There we go.
Oh,
and it's
good.
titled. Okay. So with those, you said those are Arizona wines you were...
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned Chateau Tumbleweed. So that kind of leads us into the factoid. And since you guys are both hanging out down there semi-live in Arizona, we thought it would be kind of fun if you would lay some factoids about Arizona wine on us. I've gotten to have some Arizona wine. We don't see a lot of it. So why don't you tell the listeners what we need to know about Arizona wine?
All right, Steph and I are going to boggle your mind. So here we go. So Arizona has 3 major wine growing regions. There's 3: Verde Valley, Sonoyta, and Wilcox. So those are the 3. There are only 2 AVAs, the American viticultural areas in the state, and they are both in the southeast part of the state. So Sonoyta is one of those, established in 1985, definitely by far the oldest, between Tucson and Mexico. Neat little area. We could probably chat about that because Steph and I have been there.
Yeah.
My gosh, it's been like 10 years ago probably since we've been there.
It.
And the newest AVA, which is Wilcox, which was established in 2016, which does in fact grow about 74% of the state's wine grapes. So it's definitely a good producer for that.
Yeah, significant. You know, there's some even urban places to taste wine and drink wine, but those are the wine growing areas where the vineyards are. And this state is pretty special because viticulture started way back in the 16th century, which a lot of people might not realize, but modern winemaking kicked off in the early 1980s in Sonoyta specifically. What makes Arizona unique is the diurnal shift, meaning the dramatic shift from the warm day to the nighttime temperatures that are cool. And so sometimes those temperature swings can be as much as 50 degrees. The grapes love that, and the grapes also love the higher elevations. And so in Arizona, those specific grape growing areas are usually between 3,500 and 5,500 feet above sea level. So that's kind of cool. A lot of people just think of Arizona as the hot desert.
The desert.
Right, but it's not. It's not. And as of this recording right now, there's right around 120 wineries licensed and operating in the state, according to the Arizona Wine Growers Association. I did contact them because I was like, I know there's more than 100, but what are they saying now? And so it's right around 120. Some of the most popular grapes grown here in Arizona are Syrah, Grenache, Cabernet Sauvignon. They also have, which is a surprise, Italian varieties like Sangiovese, Spanish varieties, and then these classic French varieties. It's an amazing, beautiful, diverse state that people don't really think of when they think of Arizona. I mean, even my husband Justin spent a lot of time living in Flagstaff, so did Clay. And people go, oh, you're from Arizona. And it's like you have to really kind of tell people.
Oh, my gosh. You have to blow their mind. Yeah, because Flagstaff's like 7,000 feet with pine trees and snow and ski resort and all that stuff. And,
And so some of the grapes. Some of the grapes.
I said gropes before, too. What does that say,
Yeah,
Steph?
you have said gropes. But, yeah, so some of the grapes that grow, it's when we put grape.
Grow and grape.
Grape and grow go together, and it says gropes. But yeah, so between Phoenix and Flagstaff, there's that great wine grape growing area. And
the Page Springs area.
Yeah. So there's some, Javelina Springs, Page Springs Cellars, some of these wineries up there are really outstanding.
Because it's right there in between the trees, the tree line, and the desert. So it's that 3,500, 5,000 feet. You don't quite get the pine trees. You get those small, more oak type trees in that climate, and it's really beautiful. It's a little bit obviously warmer than the North Country, but nowhere near as hot as the desert.
Yeah, and so they have those nice temperature changes, and then in southern Arizona as well, they have some higher elevations, some really good temperature changes that the grapes really thrive, and so it's a cool state with outstanding wine, kind of a sleeper state.
The sleeper state.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and so we've got some recommendations of wineries that Clay and I have visited, that Val and I have tasted, that we're going to put in the blog if you want to check those out as far as recommendations, and then some other resources, a documentary, and some other goodies that you can find in the blog.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. That was more than I think any of us expected to know.
Good. It's good.
Yes.
It's good. Well, on to Wino Radar, I think.
Yes, Clay, lay a Wino Radar on us.
Wino Radar. You got it. Here we go. The charity event I mentioned earlier, we're hosting that again. It's called the Grape Arizona Wine Event, not the Grope Arizona Wine Event. Just for everybody. Yeah. That's a totally different event, by the way. This one is the Grape Arizona Wine Event. So this year it's on Sunday, November 4th, 2018, from 1 to 5 p.m. At Heritage Square in downtown Phoenix. And it's such a cool location. November is an amazing type of year in Arizona, or specifically in Phoenix, because it's nice and cool. It's our prime time. And it's downtown Phoenix, so there's so much going on culturally. Obviously, it's an opportunity to taste Arizona wines. There's about 7 or 8 local Arizona wineries there, some really amazing ones. Chateau Tumbleweed, who I mentioned earlier, and also some local breweries. The food is amazing. We got some really great local food folks as well, too, because this is a foodie kind of town. The event is to benefit the Rotary Club I'm in, Phoenix Rotary 100, and it raises money for the local and international charities that we represent. Getting international kids here to the States, building peace conferences in between Mexico, United States, and a number of other countries. So really amazing event. Would love you guys to come out or find out more. I think you guys are going to put it on your blog. Maybe.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And tell them Clay sent you.
That's right.
What was that?
Tell anybody that Clay
tell them that Clay sent you. I am the only Clay in the club, so that
Clay
might...
from Wine 25.
Wine 35. I think we renamed it, guys.
Wine
Let's
35.
be honest. This is a fun show.
Love,
it's Wine
love.
35 now.
Love. Oh my gosh.
That's so cute. That's so cute. All right. Well, moving on to shout outs. I have a shout out to a Phoenix location that I just went to and have to applaud. The Blue Hound Kitchen and Cocktails. It's in downtown Phoenix.
So good.
Right?
Oh, I love that
Oh my
place.
gosh. And the location is right next to the Kimpton Hotel Palomar and also just a couple of blocks from the Talking Stick Arena that I saw Shakira in concert. But Val, you would have died for the roasted cauliflower. I'm giving it a double yum, double thumbs up. Everything was so outstanding. The wine list was good. The cocktails are ridiculous.
They have a cigar smoked bourbon where they literally catch cigar smoke upside down in the bourbon, and when you lift off the top, it's like smoky cigar bourbon. It is just mind-bending, out of this world. Double yum to Shakira too, apparently.
Yeah,
Steph said.
absolutely.
Yes, double yum to cauliflower, roasted cauliflower, and Shakira.
Oh, and bourbon and cigar smoke
the smoky
bourbon. So nothing to hate there. And usually Kimpton properties are pretty nice.
Oh.
Yeah.
Aren't they?
Yeah, that's
Seriously.
awesome. Anything else before we move on?
I don't think so. We're giving lots of shout outs to these wineries that we like, and Phoenix and Arizona, the whole state is a good place to visit.
That is so cool. Well, you know what else is cool is our show sponsor, and that is Wine Still Sold Out.
Yes. And weekly tasting from Wine Still Sold Out. With each shipment, you can compare and contrast wines side by side and, compare oak, appellation, vintage, whatever, without being in a structured class. So just in the comfort of your home with your friends. It's really a cool thing. Weekly tasting. Check it out.
Go to your listener page at weeklytasting.com/wine5 to sign up, get started, or go to our webpage and click on the link. And if you guys do, put some pictures in the hashtag W25 challenge if you discover something new on there so we can see what you're drinking.
Totally.
All right. I think you guys are flipping it over to me here for this Patreon love. Is this the Patreon love segment?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to give the thank yous to the Wine 25s, or thank you to Wine 25s. So Reserva Superiore supporter, Robin from Girls Gone Grape, Reserva supporter, Auntie in Georgia, the Tenacious Tasters, Jeff E. from the We Like Drinking podcast, Sebastian of Sassy Italian Tours, Jen in Maryland, David and Lisa in Illinois, Anne Marie in Virginia,
And our It's Not 5 O'Clock and We Don't Care listeners. You just heard one of them, Clay in Arizona, but there's Meg in South Dakota. You know her. In California, John, Andrew, Aswani, and Kristen. Chantel is in Ontario, Canada. Mary Lou in Pennsylvania. Kathy in Georgia. And right here in beautiful 76 degrees, Colorado, we have Chris, Janet, and Diane. In Illinois, Steve, Renee, Kathy in Tennessee, Sean in Ohio, and in North Carolina, Ashley and Sarah. And speaking of Sarah, she is our friend who's originally from the UK in a town called Chester. She studied international management and hotel catering at Manchester Metropolitan University and received her MBA from Oxford Brookes University. Sarah currently works for Janson and Wales University on the Charlotte campus, where her primary focus is on wine education. She earned the diploma from WSET, is a CWE and a CSS with the SWE, sounds like a rap song, and also holds the diploma and sommelier certification from the International Sommelier Guild. Sarah, we thank you so much for your friendship and support, and welcome to the Patreon pack.
And to our Tastemaker listeners, David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California, Chip and Katie in Pennsylvania, Serena in New York, Annie in Colorado, and Danielle. And the kids have just arrived, so if we hear any back noise, the family is in the house.
Well, you guys can go to our Patreon page for details, patreon.com/wine-to-5podcast, on how to be entered into our monthly drawing, get access to exclusive content, and get your very own W25 swag, t-shirts, buttons, Govino glasses, etc. And between every single episode, you can find us. You can still reach out to us. We have goodies on our website. We have affiliate links. We have all kinds of fun stuff. And we're in the social spaces at Wine25. And Clay, you heard him here. You can connect with him too on the social spaces. Twitter at ClayPHX. Facebook /Clayton M. Janson. You can also find him in the Wine to Five community page if you want to reach out. He's dished out recommendations to other listeners there before. They know him. They love him. But until next week, everybody.
Cheers!
Cheers! Thanks, ladies.
Thank you for listening to the Wine to Five podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook /WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.